October 29th, 1929. Black Tuesday. The day the music stopped. The day fortunes vanished like smoke in the wind. And for millions of Americans, the day survival became the only thing that mattered. They called it the Great Depression, friends. But that word, depression, it don't quite capture the weight of it, the hunger, the fear. The nights when mothers went to bed with empty bellies so their children could eat one more spoonful of beans. For 10 long years, an entire generation learned a truth that we've somehow forgotten. You don't need much to survive. In fact, you need almost nothing at all. Tonight, I'm going to tell you about 7 meals, 7 recipes born not from cookbooks, but from desperation, from ingenuity, from that old American spirit that refused to break, even when everything else did. And here's the thing, neighbors, in 2025, with inflation eating away at every paycheck, with folks choosing between medicine and groceries, maybe it's time we remembered what our grandparents knew all along. These meals could save you thousands of dollars this year, but more than that, they might just save something we've lost, something more valuable than money. Let me show you what I mean. Meal number 1, poor man's meal, winter of 1932, Detroit, Michigan. The auto factories had gone silent. Men who once built America's cars now stood in bread lines that stretched for city blocks. In those cold water flats, mothers learned to make something out of almost nothing. 3 potatoes, 1 onion, and if you were lucky, if God smiled on you that week, maybe a single hot dog to slice paper thin and stretch across the whole meal. You'd slice those potatoes thin, real thin. Fry 'em up with the onions and whatever fat you had. Lard, bacon grease saved from who knows when. And that smell of onions hitting hot iron was enough to make you believe that maybe, just maybe, tomorrow would be better. 4 people could eat on that, really eat, for maybe 30 cents. In today's money, you could make this meal right now for less than $3. Feed your whole family, and you know what? It'll taste better than anything you'd pay $20 for at some restaurant. The lesson here, friends, isn't just about potatoes and onions. It's about seeing what you have instead of wanting what you don't. Those folks in 1932, they didn't have a choice, but we do, and somehow we've chosen to forget. Meal number 2, dandelion salad, spring of 1933, rural Ohio. When you got no money for the grocer, you learn real quick that the good Lord provides, if you know where to look. City folks, they'd never believe it, but country families knew. Those yellow flowers you see as weeds in your yard, that's food, free food, growing right there under your feet while you're worrying about the next meal. The young leaves, picked before the flowers bloom, they're tender, slightly bitter, yes, but alive with vitamins that kept scurvy and Sickness away when there was no money for oranges or fresh vegetables. You'd toss 'em with a little vinegar, maybe a drop of oil if you had it. Some families added bacon grease for flavor. My own grandmother, she used to tell me about walking the roadside with her sisters, filling flour sacks with dandelion greens. She said it made her feel rich, not poor, rich. Because while the banks had failed and the money was gone, the earth still gave. Today, we poison this food. We pay companies to come, kill it, and then we drive to the store and pay $5 for a box of organic greens that ain't half as nutritious. Makes you wonder who's really got it figured out, don't it? Meal number 3, Mulligan Stew. The railroad camps, the hobo jungles, 1934. Men riding the rails looking for work that didn't exist, traveling from town to town on empty stomachs and thinner hope. But they had something we've lost. Friends, they had each other, and they had Mulligan Stew. Not a recipe, really. More like a prayer made from whatever you could find. Everyone threw in what they had. One man might have a carrot he'd pulled from a farmer's field. Another, a handful of beans he'd been saving. Someone else, a soup bone they'd begged from a butcher or found in the trash behind a restaurant. And it all went into the pot together. No one asked who contributed what. No one kept score. When that stew was ready, every man got a share, equal, fair, the way it should be. That's what Mulligan Stew was really about, see? It wasn't just food. It was proof that when everything falls apart, when the system fails and the safety nets are gone, people still take care of each other if we choose to. Today, you could make a pot of Mulligan Stew for maybe $7. Throw in whatever vegetables are cheap or getting old in your fridge. Some beans, a bit of meat if you got it. Let it simmer. You'll have food for days. But more than that, you'll remember something about who we used to be. Meal number 4, water soup, or as folks bitterly called it, Hoover Stew. Named after President Herbert Hoover, who promised prosperity and delivered, well, you can guess what he delivered. This was the meal of absolute desperation, friends. When you had nothing, when even the poor man's meal was too expensive, when your children went to bed crying from hunger and you had to put something in their bellies, even if that something was mostly hot water and hope. Water, a few vegetable scraps, whatever you could beg from the neighbors or find in the trash bins behind markets. You'd boil it all together, maybe add a little flour to thicken it if you had any, and you'd serve it carefully, like it was precious. Because to those children, it was. And mothers. Mothers would pretend they weren't hungry, would say they'd eaten already, would give their portion to the little ones and go to bed with that gnawing emptiness in their gut. That's the thing about real poverty, see? It shows you who people really are. Today, we throw away more food than those families saw in a month. We scrape half-eaten meals into the garbage without a second thought. I'm not saying we should go back to water soup. God, no. But maybe we should remember that every scrap of food is someone's labor, someone's sweat, someone's prayer answered. Meal number 5, depression cake, or as some called it, wacky cake. Now, friends, not every depression meal was about survival. Some were about living, about finding joy when joy seemed impossible. This cake was born because eggs cost too much. Milk was for drinking, not baking. Butter? That was a luxury from another lifetime. But somehow, some brilliant, stubborn woman figured out you could make a cake without any of it. Flour, cocoa, a little sugar hoarded from the ration, vinegar for leavening, oil instead of butter. Mix it right in the pan. No sense dirtying extra dishes when water's got to be hauled and heated. And when that cake came out of the oven, when that smell filled the house and those children realized they were getting dessert, that wasn't just food, friend. That was a mother saying, we may be poor, but we're still a family. We still have reasons to smile. You can make this cake today for less than $2. Costs less than a fancy coffee. And I'll tell you something. When you taste it, knowing the story behind it, knowing what it meant, it'll be the sweetest thing you ever ate. Meal number 6, prune, pudding. Now I know what you're thinking. Prunes? But hear me out, because this meal saved lives. Literally. Dried prunes were cheap. They kept forever without refrigeration. And most important, they were nutritious. In a time when fresh fruit was impossible for most families, these wrinkled little things prevented malnutrition, kept children alive. You'd stew them down with a little water, thicken it with flour or breadcrumbs, add a tiny bit of precious sugar if you could spare it. And somehow, this humble pudding tasted like you were doing all right. Like life wasn't just about surviving. The lesson here, friends, the cheapest food ain't always the worst food. Sometimes it's exactly what you need. A pound of dried prunes today costs about $3. Will feed your family dessert for a week. But more than that, it teaches you to see value where others see nothing. Meal number 7, bread and lard. The simplest meal of all, and maybe the most important. Flour, water, a pinch of salt, yeast if you could get it, though some families kept a sourdough starter alive for years, treating it like a member of the family, because in a way it was. It kept them alive. Fresh bread, still warm, spread with a thin layer of lard, pork fat saved and rendered with care, maybe a sprinkle of salt. And friends, that was a meal, a good meal, a meal that stuck to your ribs and got you through another day of looking for work or tending crops in soil that refused to give. My grandmother made this for me once. When I was young, I remember thinking it seemed too simple, too plain. But she looked at me with those Depression-era eyes and said, "Child, if you've got bread, you've got everything. Remember that." Today, we pay $7 for artisan bread, but you can make a better loaf at home for 70 cents. And when you do, when you smell that yeast and feel that dough come alive in your hands, you're connecting to every generation that came before you, every person who survived, who endured. Now, friends, I'm not saying we need to go back to the Depression. God knows those were hard times, brutal times, times that broke people who deserved better. But what I am saying is this: we've forgotten the difference between needing and wanting, between enough and more, between survival and just collecting stuff. The average American family spends $1,200 a month on groceries, and we throw away a third of it. If you adopted just 3 of these Depression-era meals into your weekly rotation, not every meal, just 3, you'd save over $3,500 a year, maybe more. That's a vacation. That's a new roof. That's breathing room when everything else is squeezing tight. But more than the money, friends, you'd be teaching your children something precious. You'd be showing them that happiness don't come from abundance. It comes from gratitude, from knowing how to make do, from refusing to be helpless just because times get hard. Those Depression-era folks, they lived through hell, lost everything, went to bed hungry more nights than we can imagine. But you know what they didn't lose? Their dignity, their ingenuity, their absolute refusal to quit. They learned to make something out of nothing, to find joy in a slice of bread, to see wealth not in what they had, but in what they could do with what they had. These 7 meals, they're not just recipes, friends. They're a kind of resistance. Resistance against the idea that we're helpless, that we need all this expensive, complicated, wasteful abundance to be happy, to be fed. We're losing this wisdom, neighbors, losing it fast. Every Depression-era grandmother who passes away takes these skills, these stories, this knowledge with her, and we're replacing it with what? Takeout menus and food delivery apps? That ain't progress. That's forgetting. So here's what I'm asking you to do. Make one of these meals this week. Just one. Sit down with your family. Tell them the story behind it. Tell them about the folks who survived on this, who found joy in this. And maybe while you're eating that simple food, you'll realize something. You'll realize you have everything you need right here, right now. And that's a wealth those stock market crashes can't touch. If this story meant something to you, if these meals and these lessons matter, then subscribe. Help me preserve this wisdom before it's lost, forever. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because these aren't just recipes, friends. They're proof that we're tougher than we think, that we can survive anything, that we've done it before. And by God, if we remember what they taught us, we can do it again. Thank you for listening, and remember them. Please remember them.